Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves Caitlin Clark.
You're looking at a woman who tore her ACL, came back from it, and then went out and broke the WNBA all-time assists record in her second professional season. Now she's sitting on the sideline with ice on her knee, and people are pretending they don't know how it got there. Stephen A. Smith, not some random sports blogger, not a Twitter account with 3 followers, Stephen A. Smith went on national television and said out loud what millions of people have been thinking since the moment Alyssa Thomas drove her elbow into Caitlin Clark's knee and walked away without so much as a flagrant foul. He said it was dangerous. He said someone needs to be held accountable. And now the question every serious sports fan in America needs to ask is very simple. Why is the WNBA still pretending this isn't a pattern? Why is the organization that has spent years begging for mainstream legitimacy still responding to incidents like this with language so soft it barely qualifies as a reprimand? And why is Alyssa Thomas, a veteran player who absolutely knows where her elbows are at all times, still walking around without a suspension while Caitlin Clark sits on a trainer's table? Those are not rhetorical questions. We are going to answer every single one of them today, with footage, with receipts, and with the kind of analysis this story deserves and has not been getting from the people who should be delivering it. Let's be precise about who we're dealing with before we go any further. Stephen A. Smith is the highest-paid sports media personality in ESPN history. He has covered the NBA for 3 decades. He has covered the NFL, boxing, tennis, international soccer, and every major American sports moment of the last 25 years. He is not easily rattled. He is not prone to overreaction on women's sports topics. In fact, critics have spent years accusing him of exactly the opposite, of not taking the WNBA seriously enough, of dismissing it when he should have been amplifying it. So, when that man sits down in front of a camera and uses the word dangerous to describe what Alyssa Thomas did to Caitlin Clark's knee, you do not get to wave it away. You do not get to call it misogyny. You do not get to frame it as another ignorant hot take from a guy who doesn't watch women's basketball. That is a credentialed, mainstream, experienced professional sports voice, applying the exact same standard he would apply to any contact in any league, in any arena, at any level of competition, and arriving at the conclusion that what happened was wrong, that it was avoidable, that the person who did it has a track record, and that the punishment, if you can even dignify it with that word, was a disgrace. He was not alone in that conclusion. Former players said the same thing. Analysts who have spent careers defending the WNBA against exactly the kind of criticism that makes the league uncomfortable said the same thing. Commentators who have actively and repeatedly pushed back against what they describe as Caitlin Clark's overexposed fan base looked at the footage and arrived at the same place. This is not a fringe position. This is not a culture war flashpoint being manufactured by people who never watched a WNBA game before Iowa made the national championship. This is what the footage shows, and it is what honest people who watch sports for a living are saying about it. Here is what actually happened. Caitlin Clark drives baseline, her momentum carries her toward Alyssa Thomas, and Thomas, a 6-year veteran of this league, a player who has been in physical situations thousands of times at every level of professional competition, brings her elbow down and across the side of Clark's knee. Not her hip. Not her thigh. Her knee, a joint that, as any athlete or anyone who has ever watched sports medicine content for 30 seconds understands, is one of the most catastrophically vulnerable structures in the human body. The ACL, the MCL, the meniscus. These are not structures that heal quickly or completely. These are the injuries that end seasons, derail careers, and in some cases alter the trajectory of an athlete's entire professional life. The force of Thomas's elbow on that joint was not incidental. The angle was not the product of two players going for a ball in a contested space. Clark went down. She grabbed her knee. She stayed down long enough that everyone inside that arena, the players, the coaches, the officials standing feet away, the thousands of fans in the seats, understood that something had gone wrong. The training staff came out. The game paused. And in that moment, everyone with eyes understood what they had just watched. That's the version the league wants you to accept as the full story. What actually happened was a veteran player with a well-documented history of aggressive physical play made contact with a young player's knee in a manner that, had the angle been slightly different, had Clark's foot been planted 1 inch to the left, had the torque transferred differently through that joint, could have torn ligaments, ended her season, and potentially shortened her career. In front of referees, in front of multiple camera angles, in front of a sold-out arena broadcasting to a national television audience, and the WNBA's response was to review the play and issue a flagrant 1 foul. Not a flagrant 2, not an ejection, not a 1-game suspension pending review, not a statement from the commissioner's office expressing concern for player safety. A flagrant 1 foul, basketball's equivalent of a parking ticket, quietly filed, quickly forgotten, specifically designed to make this story disappear before the news cycle moved on. Now, let's look at the exact language the WNBA used in their official communication about this play, because language is always where institutions reveal what they actually think. They described the contact as unnecessary and excessive. Sit with those words for a moment. Unnecessary. As if the operative question in professional sports discipline is whether the contact served a basketball purpose. As if the bar for league action is simply, did this player need to do that? Excessive. A word so deliberately vague, it could describe a hard foul in the first quarter of a regular season game. Not dangerous, not reckless, not the kind of contact this league will not tolerate, regardless of who the players involved are. Unnecessary and excessive. A phrase calibrated to satisfy the requirement of saying something while committing to absolutely nothing. And look at the passive construction of how it was announced. As if the contact happened in a vacuum. As if an elbow made contact with a knee the same way weather happens, without an agent, without a decision, without a player who chose to extend that arm at that angle in that moment. The WNBA's official language told you exactly how seriously they take Caitlin Clark's physical safety when the player causing the harm is Alyssa Thomas. And then came the consequences. No suspension. No publicly announced fine with a number attached that would signal to every player in this league where the line is. No statement from Kathy Engelbert's office. No press availability where someone in authority looked into a camera and said, "This will not happen again, and here is what we will do to the next player who makes this choice." Just a flagrant one, quietly recorded in the official game log, and a league that went back to business as if nothing worth addressing had occurred. That comparison to how other professional sports leagues handle similar situations is not just relevant, it is devastating. 4 years ago, the NBA suspended a player 3 games for an elbow that made contact with an opponent's head during a play that, on first review, looked like it might have been incidental. The league looked at the angle of the contact, looked at the player's history, looked at the risk that type of contact poses regardless of intent, and said, "We are not waiting for a catastrophic outcome before we apply a standard." The suspension sent a message. Players adjusted. The NFL has a system of escalating fines for contact that endangers specific body parts, not because those hits always result in injury, but because the league made a policy decision that certain types of contact are unacceptable independent of outcome. Hockey, a sport where physical contact is foundational and celebrated, has a Department of Player Safety that reviews plays after the fact and issues supplemental discipline specifically to address dangerous contact that officials may have missed or underreacted to in real time. These are not perfect systems. They are inconsistent, and they have their own critics. But they are systems built on a foundational premise that the WNBA apparently has not yet internalized. In a serious professional sports organization, the standard for discipline is not what happened. It is what could have happened, given the nature of the contact and the vulnerability of the body part targeted. Alyssa Thomas's elbow hit Caitlin Clark's knee. That is not an interpretation. That is footage viewed from 4 angles. And the WNBA's response, a flagrant one and silence, reveals an organization applying a standard no other major American professional sports league would recognize as adequate. Caitlin Clark is the reason the Indiana Fever sold out their entire home schedule for the first time in franchise history. Not just once, but in back-to-back seasons. Caitlin Clark is the reason WNBA television ratings reached numbers the league had not seen in over 2 decades. Numbers that surprised network executives who had been scheduling WNBA games in the dead zones of their broadcast calendar for years. Caitlin Clark is the reason new national broadcast deals were negotiated with terms that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. She is the reason new corporate sponsors came to the table. She is the reason sports media outlets that had not assigned a full-time reporter to women's basketball in years suddenly had staff dedicated to covering this league daily. She is the reason expansion franchises are being valued at numbers that bear no relationship to where WNBA franchise valuations were before she turned professional. Her merchandise outsells every other player in the league. Not slightly, not by a comfortable margin, but by a ratio that would be embarrassing to publish in a league memo. Her games draw television audiences that consistently double and sometimes triple the numbers generated by matchups featuring the previous 4-time MVP of this league. She is not a novelty. She is not a social media moment that will fade when the algorithm moves on. She is a structural, foundational, generational transformation of this league's economic reality and public profile. And that reality existed before Alyssa Thomas's elbow connected with her knee. And it will exist after, but only if Caitlin Clark remains healthy enough to play basketball at the level she plays it. Every game Clark misses is a ratings event that doesn't happen. Every game Clark plays at diminished capacity because she is managing a knee injury is a product that is worse than what the broadcast partners paid for and what the fans bought tickets to see. That Caitlin Clark, the player who single-handedly moved every financial needle this league has, went down holding her knee, and the WNBA's answer was a flagrant, 1 foul and institutional silence should make every person who has a financial stake in this league's future profoundly uncomfortable. Stephen A. Smith said publicly what a significant portion of the sports media world is thinking, but carefully calculating whether it is professionally safe to say out loud. And before anyone reaches for the predictable frames, before anyone says this is about race, or about Clark's fan base, or about people who came to women's basketball through a culture war and left their good faith at the door, let's be precise and honest about what is actually being observed here. Alyssa Thomas has a reputation as a physical player. That reputation was established inside the WNBA itself long before Caitlin Clark was drafted. Players and coaches around the league know it. It is not a controversial characterization. It is a documented professional identity. But there is a pattern that has now extended across 2 seasons and multiple documented incidents. And the pattern is this. Caitlin Clark specifically has been on the receiving end of physical contact that in any other major professional league would have generated suspension conversations, formal reviews, and public statements from league leadership. And the WNBA's consistent response has been to minimize the severity, deploy language calibrated to de-escalate rather than address, and take no action that would produce the kind of headlines that force the league to confront what is happening on its own floors. The WNBA has built its identity around the claim that it deserves the same respect, the same coverage, the same standards, and the same institutional seriousness as any other professional sports league in America. That is a claim this league makes loudly and repeatedly. But a league that applies serious standards to player safety applies them consistently, not selectively based on who the players are or what narratives their discipline might complicate. And the observable record of how the WNBA has responded to physical play targeting Caitlin Clark across 2 seasons does not reflect an organization applying serious, consistent standards. It reflects an organization making calculations that have nothing to do with player safety and everything to do with managing a story it finds inconvenient. And here is where it becomes more damning than just the Alyssa Thomas play, because this is not an isolated incident that can be explained by officiating limitations or the inherent difficulty of calling physical play in real time. It is not just this. It is Chennedy Carter's blindside hit in Chicago, a moment of deliberate, premeditated physical contact that in the NBA would have drawn a minimum 2-game suspension, that drew almost no meaningful response from WNBA leadership, and that set a precedent inside this league that targeting Caitlin Clark has a low cost. It is the multiple games where Clark has been grabbed by the arm during shooting motions in ways that were not called in real time and not reviewed or addressed afterward. It is the games where she has been shoved in the back away from the ball with officials in position to see it. It is the league's complete public silence when players and commentators affiliated with players made statements about Clark that, if directed at any other marquee player in any other professional league by a competitor, would have generated mandatory meetings, formal statements, and quiet conversations about professional conduct. It is a pattern of selective enforcement and selective silence so consistent over 2 seasons that it can no longer be attributed to oversight or error. A serious professional sports league protects its most valuable players, not because those players deserve more rights than others, but because protecting marquee players from dangerous physical contact is how you protect the product, protect the investment of broadcast partners and sponsors, and demonstrate to the sports world that you govern yourself with the same rigor you claim to deserve credit for. A serious professional sports organization does not allow the physical safety of a generational talent to become a recurring news cycle across multiple consecutive seasons while responding with flagrant ones, soft language, and the institutional equivalent of a shrug. The WNBA is behaving as though Caitlin Clark is a problem to be managed, a phenomenon that arrived uninvited and disrupted something that was working fine before her, when the evidence says clearly and loudly that she is the most valuable thing that has happened to this organization's commercial future in 20 years, and that every choice made to minimize, tolerate, or explain away the physical targeting of that player is a choice made against the WNBA's own interests. Kathy Engelbert needs to answer for this, not in a prepared statement released to the media at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and not in a press conference where she reads from talking points about player safety culture and the physical nature of professional basketball, in actual policy changes, in actual suspensions with actual game counts attached, in actual publicly announced fines with actual dollar amounts that signal to every player in this league exactly where the boundary is and what crossing it will cost. In a statement from her office that uses the word dangerous, the same word Stephen A. Smith used, the same word medical professionals would use to describe an elbow on a knee, and commits to a standard that will be applied consistently regardless of who the players are. That is not a hot take. That is not reactionary content from people who discovered women's basketball 18 months ago. That is a reasonable and minimal conclusion drawn from observable decisions made by the organization she has been paid to lead. Under her watch, the league allowed a blindside hit on Clark to pass with no meaningful discipline. The league responded to an elbow on Clark's knee with a flagrant one foul and public silence. The league has presided over 2 seasons in which the physical targeting of its most commercially significant player became a documented pattern without mounting a response proportional to the risk. The WNBA's broadcast partners negotiated deals with assumptions about what this product would be. The sponsors attached to this league made investments based on a version of this league that includes a healthy, playing, performing Caitlin Clark. The expansion franchises that paid unprecedented valuations to enter this league did so in a market transformed by Clark's presence. All of those stakeholders need Engelbert to understand that the cost of inaction is not abstract. It is measurable. It shows up in ratings. It shows up in attendance. It shows up in the value of the asset, when that asset is sitting on a sideline with ice on her knee because the league decided a flagrant one was an adequate response to dangerous contact. Caitlin Clark does not need the WNBA as much as the WNBA needs Caitlin Clark. That is not a provocative statement designed to generate engagement.